A broken radio intercept crackles through static. Fragments of desperate voices, distorted and disjointed, speak of fire and smoke where there should have been silence. A blurred photograph emerges. Jagged cave entrances, carved into volcanic rock, blackened not by age, but by something far more sinister. Flames licking at the edges. The paradox is stark. These natural fortresses, thought impregnable, became hellish tombs. How was this even possible? How did weapons designed for open battlefields turn these underground sanctuaries into infernos? What secrets did the shadows of these caves conceal that the world only now begins to uncover? In the early months of 1944, as the Pacific War intensified, American military strategists faced an impasse. Japanese forces had entrenched themselves deep within the rugged terrain of Pacific Islands, networks of caves and tunnels that resisted bombardment and infantry assaults alike. The solution emerged from an unlikely collaboration between armored, division commanders, and chemical warfare experts. A single artifact captures this genesis: a blueprint for a modified Sherman tank, its flamethrower attachment sketched in meticulous detail, designed to ignite the very air inside enemy tunnels. Why did the U.S. Army prioritize firepower over conventional artillery in this theater? What internal debates shaped this radical shift, and why was it kept under wraps from public scrutiny? The flamethrower tanks, officially designated POACWSH-1, boasted a flamethrower capable of projecting a stream of burning napalm up to 150 yards, integrated into the sturdy frame of a Sherman M4A3. Each tank carried 1,200 gallons of fuel, a volatile payload housed within armored compartments. Yet their design was not without flaws: limited range outside the tunnel mouth, vulnerability to enemy fire during refueling, and the psychological toll on crews operating amid choking smoke and heat. Photographs from technicians show the tank's gutted interiors, reinforced with heat-resistant plating, while maintenance logs reveal frequent breakdowns under combat conditions. How did these mechanical constraints shape battlefield tactics? Were commanders fully aware of the risks their crews undertook? The first deployment came during the bloody Battle of Peleliu in September 1944. A squadron of flamethrower tanks was tasked with rooting out Japanese defenders entrenched within a labyrinth of caves near Bloody Nose Ridge. Initial reports from infantry units expressed skepticism. Could fire truly purge these stone fortresses? But as the tanks advanced, gunfire gave way to screams and the smell of burning flesh. A combat photo captures a tank's flamethrower nozzle aimed into a cave opening, while soldiers watch in grim silence, faces lit by orange tongues of flame. According to after-action reports, the Japanese defenders were caught utterly off guard. What intelligence failures allowed such surprise? Did the horror witnessed here alter the rules of engagement in the Pacific? In response, Japanese forces scrambled to adapt. Engineers at Mitsubishi devised primitive flame-retardant coatings and improvised ventilation shafts to counteract the suffocating infernos. Tactical manuals, partially recovered from intercepted documents, ordered defenders to deploy booby traps at cave mouths and to avoid clustered formations vulnerable to fire. A shadowy silhouette of a Japanese officer inspecting charred tunnel walls hints at desperation and innovation born of necessity. Yet, these countermeasures often arrived too late or failed under the relentless pressure of American armored units. How effective were these adaptations in prolonging resistance? Did they reveal cracks in the seemingly impregnable Japanese defense? By early 1945, the use of flamethrower tanks had escalated into a grim standard for clearing fortified cave complexes across the Pacific. At Okinawa, with thousands of caves mapped and cataloged, flamethrower units coordinated closely with infantry and artillery, turning the island's underworld into a fiery gauntlet. Maps from U.S. intelligence detail the dense network of tunnels, overlaid with flamethrower tank routes and kill zones. A protocol document, stained with burn marks, prescribes methods for maximizing the psychological impact on enemy troops. Yet, this escalation came at a human cost not fully recorded. Tank crews suffered from heat exhaustion and post-combat trauma, their voices absent from official commendations. What unseen toll did this infernal weapon impose on those wielding it? Could the means of victory hide a darker price? Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. Amid the smoke-choked tunnels and shattered rock, an eerie silence often followed the roar of the flamethrower. In the aftermath, only twisted metal and scorched earth remained. A grainy color photo, recovered from a field medic's album, reveals charred Japanese helmets strewn near a collapsed cave entrance, silent testimony to the weapon's brutal efficiency. Yet behind these images lies a disturbing contradiction. Despite the overwhelming firepower, many caves remained stubbornly defiant, their depths unyielding. What forces allowed these pockets of resistance to endure? Was there an unseen network of escape routes or hidden chambers that the flamethrowers could not reach? The psychological impact on Japanese defenders was profound. Memoirs from surviving soldiers describe a terror unlike any other. Flames consuming oxygen, turning stone walls into ovens, and the omnipresent threat of suffocation. A cracked diary page, found decades later in a cave near Iwo Jima, speaks of men trapped between fire and darkness, clutching bayonets as their final defiance. Such first-hand accounts suggest that the flamethrower tanks did more than just incinerate. They shattered morale and sowed a pervasive fear of entrapment. How did this fear reshape Japanese defensive doctrine? Did it accelerate surrender or deepen the resolve to fight to the death? Meanwhile, American crews faced their own invisible enemy. Inside the burning tanks, temperatures soared, and toxic fumes from burning napalm seeped through seals. Medical logs from field hospitals list cases of heat stroke and respiratory damage among flamethrower operators. A stained helmet liner, preserved in a veterans museum, bears scorch marks indicative of the harsh conditions endured. Despite these hazards, the crews remained determined, driven by the grim necessity of their mission. How did military leadership balance the strategic advantage against the human cost? Were these operators seen as expendable tools or as pioneers of a new form of warfare that blurred the lines between technology and terror? The tactical doctrine evolved rapidly. Flamethrower tanks were paired with engineers who drilled additional ventilation shafts or collapsed tunnels after the flames did their work. A detailed map, annotated with red markings, shows coordinated assaults where flamethrowers cleared initial defenses, followed by demolition teams sealing caves to prevent counterattacks. Radio transcripts capture terse commands, instructing units to flush and seal, underscoring the cold efficiency of this method. Yet, this aggressive approach sometimes backfired. Sealed caves occasionally trapped surviving Japanese soldiers who detonated explosives, causing catastrophic collapses and American casualties. What intelligence failures or miscalculations led to these deadly surprises? Was the relentless push for control blinding commanders to the complexities of subterranean combat? Despite their ferocity, flamethrower tanks were not invincible. Japanese snipers targeted fuel, resupply points, and booby traps hidden near cave mouths inflicted heavy damage. Field reports include sketches of improvised explosive devices fashioned from artillery shells rigged to tripwires. Photographs show scorched, but immobilized tanks, their crews forced to abandon the burning hulks under enemy fire. These setbacks forced American engineers back to the drawing board, improving armor plating on fuel tanks and developing new tactics to secure supply lines. How close did these vulnerabilities come to derailing entire operations? Did the enemy's ingenuity reveal a critical underestimation of Japanese resilience? As the war ground on, the brutal dance between flamethrower tanks and cave defenders became a grim hallmark of Pacific combat. A faded combat patch worn by a tank crew commander symbolizes the bitter pride and heavy burden carried by those who wielded fire against stone and shadow. Behind every mission lay layers of tactical innovation, human endurance, and moral ambiguity. What stories remain buried beneath the ash and rubble, voices drowned in flame, or truths still concealed in the silent depths of those volcanic caves? In the suffocating heat of those volcanic caves, another layer of complexity emerged: chemical warfare fears. Intelligence reports intercepted from Japanese communications revealed growing paranoia about potential American use of poison gases within the tunnels. A tattered leaflet dropped over Japanese positions warned of fire that consumes the breath, amplifying psychological warfare. Though officially prohibited by international conventions, whispers among troops suggested that some flamethrower tanks carried experimental incendiary mixtures designed to produce toxic fumes alongside flames. A blurred schematic found in a declassified chemical warfare annex hints at modifications blending napalm with irritant compounds. How far did the United States push these boundaries? And what blurred lines did this create between conventional and chemical warfare in subterranean combat? Amid these fears, Japanese engineers accelerated efforts to construct escape tunnels and hidden chambers deep beneath the surface. Satellite imagery, analyzed decades later, reveals an intricate web of auxiliary caves connected by narrow passages, some extending hundreds of meters beyond known front lines. These secret corridors enabled defenders to evade flamethrower attacks and resurface unexpectedly, prolonging resistance. A haunting black and white photo shows a group of weary soldiers emerging from an unmarked cave entrance, their faces etched with exhaustion and defiance. How effective were these hidden refugees in prolonging the fight? Did American forces ever fully grasp the scale of this underground labyrinth, or were they blindsided by its complexity? The toll on American tank crews deepened as psychological trauma mounted. Letters home, recovered from veterans' archives, describe nightmares of flames closing in, the stench of burning flesh, and the constant fear of being trapped inside their own vehicles. Medical officers began documenting symptoms consistent with acute stress disorder, a precursor to what would later be classified as PTSD. A faded photograph depicts a group of flamethrower operators gathered in a makeshift tent, their expressions hollow beneath soot-streaked faces. Despite this, official reports remained clinical, focusing on kill ratios and tactical gains, glossing over the human cost. How did these mental scars shape post-war narratives? Were these men remembered as heroes, victims, or forgotten instruments of a brutal strategy? In response to mounting casualties and evolving enemy tactics, American commanders refined operational protocols. Flamethrower tanks began coordinating with aerial reconnaissance teams, who used infrared imaging to identify heat signatures within cave systems. A grainy infrared photograph, once classified top secret, reveals clusters of heat, spots deep underground, indicators of enemy presence previously undetectable. This technological leap allowed for more precise targeting, minimizing the need for prolonged assaults. Yet, it also raised ethical questions about the intensification of targeting methods in confined spaces. How did this shift influence the balance between military necessity and humanitarian considerations? Were these advances a step toward surgical precision or total annihilation? Despite these innovations, entire cave complexes resisted capture for weeks on end. The Battle of Iwo Jima, in particular, showcased the brutal stalemate these underground fortresses imposed. Detailed battle maps show concentric rings of American advance, stymied by entrenched defenders in interconnected tunnels. Reports from infantry commanders highlight the exhaustion and dwindling supplies faced by flamethrower crews operating in this grueling environment. A grim photo captures a tank crew repairing a crippled flamethrower under enemy fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of distant flames. How did prolonged engagements like this reshape American tactical doctrine? Did the cost in men and machines prompt reconsideration of flamethrower tank deployment strategies? At the war's close, the legacy of these fiery machines lingered in silence. Many flamethrower tanks were abandoned in the jungles, swallowed by time and nature. A recent underwater expedition uncovered a rusted hull submerged near the Philippine archipelago, its flamethrower nozzle pointing eternally toward the depths. Veterans' reunions often spoke in hushed tones about the horrors witnessed, stories passed down cautiously, as if some memories were too volatile to fully ignite. What hidden truths remain locked within these relics? And how does this infernal chapter of warfare continue to shape the shadowed corridors of military history? In the quiet aftermath of the Pacific campaigns, a trove of forgotten reports surfaced, revealing an unsettling detail. Several flamethrower tank crews had been formally reprimanded, not for combat failures, but for refusing orders to ignite certain cave complexes. A yellowed disciplinary memo, stamped and signed by a battalion commander, cites psychological distress impairing mission effectiveness. Photographs from these incidents show tanks idle at cave entrances, crews with vacant stares, some shielding their faces from the camera. What internal conflicts plagued these men? Did the weight of turning natural fortresses into blazing tombs fracture their resolve? And how did military command reconcile such acts of silent defiance within the rigid hierarchy of war? Meanwhile, investigations into the environmental aftermath began to surface, albeit quietly. Geological surveys conducted post-war detected thermal scarring deep within the volcanic substrates, zones where repeated flamethrower assaults had altered mineral compositions. A faded field notebook from a U.S. Army geologist details heat-induced metamorphism of cave walls, a lasting imprint of the infernos unleashed. Local islanders' oral histories speak of cursed mountains, where the earth seemed to smolder long after battles ceased. Could these scars have influenced the island's ecosystems for decades? What hidden costs did tactical firepower exact on the land itself? And were these consequences ever weighed against immediate military gains? The psychological warfare extended beyond the battlefield. Propaganda leaflets, captured and translated from Japanese archives, reveal attempts to exploit fear of flamethrower tanks among civilians and soldiers alike. One leaflet, illustrated with a grotesque image of a tank spewing fire into a cavern, warned of flames that devour the soul. Allied counterintelligence intercepted and analyzed these materials, noting their effect on troop morale. A classified memo discusses the paradox. While flamethrower tanks terrorized the enemy, the same terror sometimes seeped into American ranks, fueling anxiety and hesitation. How did this dual-edged terror influence the broader strategy? Was the weapon as much psychological as physical? In the final months of the war, as Japan's defenses crumbled, flamethrower tank units were reassigned to occupation duties, their terrifying reputation preceding them. Several after-action interviews recount how Japanese civilians, upon surrender, would recount stories of the fire beasts that turned caves into hellscapes. A grainy newsreel captures a former crew member reflecting quietly. We thought we were gods of fire, but maybe just demons. This haunting admission underscores the moral ambiguity surrounding their role. How did these men reconcile their actions with the human cost? Did the horrors witnessed underground leave scars deeper than those visible on battered tanks? Archival evidence also reveals that some flamethrower tanks were retrofitted post-war for civilian applications, such as controlled burns in forestry. A rare photograph shows a tank, repainted and stripped of insignia, igniting brush on a California hillside. The transformation from instrument of war to tool of land management raises unsettling questions about the legacy of destruction and renewal. Does this repurposing symbolize redemption, or a troubling erasure of violent origins? And what does it say about society's relationship with machines designed for devastation? In private correspondence, a squadron commander lamented the impossibility of fully capturing the war's subterranean horrors on paper. His final reports, heavily redacted and sealed for decades, hint at unspoken atrocities and the limits of military documentation. A sealed envelope, labeled Eyes Only, was only recently declassified, revealing testimonies that challenge official narratives. What truths remain hidden within these pages? And how much of the inferno beneath the islands will history never dare to fully illuminate? Decades after the last flame had died, the remnants of those battles still whispered beneath the soil. Archaeological teams uncovered skeletal remains in sealed caves, their positions frozen in final acts of defiance or despair. Among the artifacts unearthed were scorch-marked personal effects, dog tags warped by heat, a cracked photograph of a soldier's family, a rusted bayonet fused to volcanic rock. A chilling panorama from excavation sites reveals the eerie coexistence of human fragility and the relentless machinery of war. These discoveries forced historians to confront not only the tactical triumphs, but also the human tragedies concealed within those fiery tombs. How many stories remain buried, waiting for the light to reveal them? Survivors' testimonies, recorded in fading audio archives, recount the unbearable heat, the choking smoke, and the inescapable feeling of being consumed from within. They speak of an enemy transformed, no longer faceless soldiers, but embodiments of fire and death. Such memories challenge sanitized versions of history, revealing a war fought not just with bullets and bombs, but with terror etched in flame. A final photograph, grainy and somber, captures the faces of former flamethrower tank crews decades later, etched with lines of pain, pride, and unanswered questions. What legacy does this inferno leave behind? Is it merely a chapter of military innovation, or a haunting reminder of war's darkest depths?